Welcome everybody to Let's Talk Games. This is not a games cast. This is a special video I'm doing for you out there because we have not been there. We have not been on the YouTube channel for a few weeks, and I was getting a bit antsy, so I thought I'd do a video. As you all know, might have been earlier this year, I did a ranking of the best PlayStation 4 exclusives, and today I'm going to rank the best PlayStation studios. Sorry about the hat. I have horrible hair at the moment, and this is the only way to keep it out of my face. So we're going to go with the hat. It's normally Chunt's thing having the cap, but you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to pull it off with my Wonder Woman shirt. All right, so I'm going to go through these and rank them. But first, you probably need a visual aid. So let's have a visual aid. Now, as with my other video, I don't just rank things in 1, 2, 3, 4, or the normal IGN ratings of great whatever. I made up my own. And they're not simple one-word things. They're more for, to be able to discuss the game and actually think about what does the word mean and can this studio match up with it. So I've got elite, one game away, reliable, needs work. I'm going to have a double meaning for that when we go through these, and also too soon. I'm actually kind of glad. I was meant to do this video much earlier in the year, and I'm glad I've waited because this year Sony have bought some studios, which, I'm very happy with the ones they made. They seem very deliberate, and that's not a comment on other people buying studios, Xbox. It's not a comment on that. It's just saying it's very precise in what they've done. I think they're running out of studios that they've done that with, but there are ones like we're going to talk about Firesprite and that where I did not see that coming. But we'll talk about each studio as they come up. But last time I did a video, it was very post-processed. I did a lot of editing and stuff with that. This one's more off the cuff. I don't have really any notes except for the Wikipedia page of all the studios, and so I can look into the games I've made. But apart from that, we're just going to go through each studio and we'll just go through where we think they will. I hope you do this below. Even if you make your own video and reply to me or send it to me on Twitter, that would be great because I love talking about this stuff. This is the fluffy stuff that I love to do, which the boys know. They make fun of me about it, but I love it, and they let me do it because it's fun. So I'm just going to select randomly from all my little images here, not in any particular order, but let's go with Polyphony Digital. We all know Polyphony Digital. They are the creators of Gran Turismo. I think a lot needs to be said. They easily have the highest, the most sold game in PlayStation's history being Gran Turismo. There's not a lot of... Listen, I haven't played Gran Turismo since probably 3 on the PlayStation 2. And I'm going to start with saying they're reliable. One of the things as we go through these, it is going to become a lot of what have you done for me lately? And the reason for that being, I believe, is while you should be able to take history into account, like the history of making good games is very important, but I also think you shouldn't be able to hang your hat on a game that you made 20 years ago. These studios, especially over like a 10-year period, change. A lot of people leave. Sometimes it's not the same people at the studio that were there then that are there now. So you can't say, well, they made that great game 15 years ago or 20 years ago, because they might not be around anymore. It's not the same. And Polyphony Digital, while they released their Gran Turismos pretty close together, they've really, they used to really get them out quickly, and they take longer and longer. They were like the simulation racing studio for a long time, and I'm just looking up the years now. So Gran Turismo is coming out next year in 2022. Gran Turismo Sport was 2017. Gran Turismo 6 was 2013. But back in the day, you had Gran Turismo 2 in 99, A-Spec 3 in 2001, Gran Turismo Concept 2002, Gran Turismo 4 Prologue in 2003, Gran Turismo 4 in 2004. Like, they were ripping these out. And then as soon as they hit kind of towards the end of the PS3 era, like they had Gran Turismo 5 Prologue in 2007, Gran Turismo 5 in 2010, and then it's just this large gap, and they've literally been overtaken, no pun intended, by Forza, both on a simulation and arcade front. Gran Turismo 7 is going to come out, it's going to look really pretty, it's going to be awesome, but they're getting a little bit few and far between, and I can't put them in the one game away because this is the only game they make. So I'm going to say they're reliable because the games all come out and they're really good. But I'm going to have to. I'll put them as reliable for now, and I think that's fair. But we'll move on to somebody else. Let's go with Malaysia. This is they don't have a logo literally yet. This is the Malaysia studio out of Kuala Lumpur. Pretty much a support studio. Now I'm going to be a little bit of a cheat with this one. So with these, there's a few support studios that are part of this. I'm going to put them in needs work. Do you know why? Because for them to function, they literally need work. They are support studios. They are to support the other bigger guys. So it's hard to really. You can't put them in too soon because, well, maybe you can, because this was a studio that was only founded. What are we talking about? We're talking about 2020. So maybe it's too soon because they're probably only just starting to help with games now. So we're going to say too soon. So that makes sense. And there's going to be a few of those ones around here. Let's go with another one like that. Let's go XDEV. I'm not great at Photoshop, so bear with me. XDEV. They've been around a while. They do some really good work. You could put them as reliable, but it's too hard to keep track of them as a studio because they're just everywhere. That's the whole point. So once again, we'll just put them in needs work because they need work to function. That's the whole point, is to help others. So I'm a fan of helping others, but we'll put them in there for now. All right, let's get on to some other teams. Here we go. Let's go with Bend. So Bend Studio, this is one of those ones that I was speaking about. Talking about what have you done for me lately. So they bring out Days Gone. Solid game. I tried to play it. I've played it a few hours. I just could not get into it. Not to say I couldn't. It's a lesser version of Death Stranding for me. Death Stranding I actually really want to, but it's just got to be in the mood for. Bend, I could not get into that flow. Now, a lot of people will talk about, what about Siphon Filter? And this is one of those scenarios. I appreciate that a lot of people like the Siphon Filter games. It's cool that they made a Resistance game on PSP. Uncharted Golden Abyss, and even the Fight for Fortune game, they made it for the PlayStation Vita. But I'm sorry, I know people love those handhelds and things like that, but to be a Sony first party studio, you need to start knocking things out of the park. And they went from Fight for Fortune in 2012 to Days Gone in 2019. That's 7 years. 7 years. To bring out a game like Ben, like Days Gone, which is good, not great. A lot of people like it, but what else? There's not much there now. So I can't even call them reliable because it took them 7 years to bring out a game. So I'm sorry to the people of Ben, but I'm gonna have to put them in needs work. It sounds like they're gearing up for a different game rather than a sequel, which I'm actually happy about. I don't like if they wouldn't have spent the whole 7 years on Days Gone, but they spent a long time. And sometimes it's good for studios just to switch it up. And I like that they're trying something different. I like that they might be expanding a little bit too. So we might be able to see more of them, and hopefully they can learn from games like Days Gone about where their strengths are. Even though a lot of those leads have left. All right, let's move on to the next one. Let's pick bang. Firesprite. Okay. Firesprite never played a game. Actually, one of their games is the PlayStation Plus free game this month. I will try it out. Haven't heard great things. I've heard it's just okay. The rest of it is like playroom stuff. So, are they reliable? I think that's too. I think they're too soon, to be honest. Like I agree with the fact, and I'm not the one that came up with it, but they're a huge studio, and they also bought that other studio recently to be part of that team. But they're very new, and they have a lot of people working with them. And I go by the theory that some others have come up with, where when you buy teams like Bluepoint, which are 86 people, and then this team has like 250, like suddenly you're up there with the amount of people that are at like Naughty Dog or Sucker Punch or something like that. So that makes me think something they're working on, Sony really likes, and they're willing to bring in all those people straight away and get them there and have whatever this game is they're working. Well, there's 2 games they're working on. One is rumored a Horizon type game, a Horizon multiplayer game or something. So that doesn't sound very exciting to me. But clearly they're working on something. But it's too soon for this group. They need to show us something. You can't. I don't necessarily think they need work, because I don't also think you can judge them just on the 1 or 2 games that they've really made, especially when some are, tech demos for like VR and stuff. It's not fair to judge them on that. So I'm just going to say they're too soon. I'm excited to see what they come up with and why Sony wanted to get them, but yeah, too soon. We're going to, hopefully in a couple of years, if I get to do this again, they'll be further up the list. All right, now, Pixelopus. So some of you might not even heard of, but Pixelopus, I remember when they were announced, they were announced and they came out with it was one of those, and this game's available right now with Entwined, and that was good. And then they came out with Concrete Genie, which I have on the PlayStation, but I haven't gotten to go through it fully. I've only gone like 30 minutes in. The thing I like about this was this studio was basically just brought out of a bunch of people coming out of like colleges and universities. I think it was over in United Kingdom somewhere. But I just like the idea that it was Sony put in some leads that had experience, but the workers there were ones that came out of college and university. That's really cool, and they've slowly stepping up their games, but it's too early to say they're reliable. I think they're trying new things. I like that they tried to do stuff with the motion in the controllers, but I think needs work. I think you can't come out 2 games that are good, not great. I think it makes sense to have needs work. It doesn't seem reliable to me. Like I can't say, all right, I need to make, and here's this game concept idea. Which Sony studio can you give it to, and you're going to, guarantee that they're going to do a serviceable job. And you can't pick one of the bigger ones. Like I just don't think they're that reliable yet. I think we need to get one that kind of starts creeping up to, we've been sleeping on this studio. So from that, let's get. I want to kind of get rid of these ones. So this is what I've got for Sony San Mateo. It's another support studio. Too soon. Well, let's just put it down here, because what more can you say? That San Mateo only opened up in. Let me see. says 1998 here, but I think that's a different one to what I'm thinking of. Anyway, Sports Studio. Let's move on. I don't want to go on about that too much. All right, let's get one of the blank ones down here. Let's go with... Let's go with these guys. All right. Housemarque. One of the studios that were purchased by Sony this year, just after Returnal. By the time you see this... Actually, I don't know when I'm going to put this up. But I'm about to talk on the podcast, on the next time we do the podcast. I've actually jumped back into Returnal a little bit. There is something addictive about that game. Like, you just come back, and at this point, I don't even care if I progress. I just love going through it and seeing how far I can get now. I'm in World 4, so it'd probably be a little bit different if I was stuck on, the first or second. But I just love going through it. Now, in terms of, I've played a bunch of their other games. Bear with me for a sec while I bring them up, because I've actually played I've played more than I thought I have. So I played Dead Nation, played Resogun when that came out on PlayStation 4. I loved playing that. Played Alien Nation, which was through PlayStation Plus. There's games like Matterfall, Next Machina, which people talk about, let alone the Super Stardust, which I never got into back then because I was too cool. If you watch my PlayStation 4 video, I actually had a couple of these games on there, like Resogun, Alien Nation, and what they constantly came for in that was that they were good games. And the problem I had with them is that for me to get into those top tier ones, which I think is Elite and the great games, is like story mode. Like, that's why I play games, is for the story. And while those games had lore and stuff like that, it wasn't really about the story. Housemarque with Returnal has tried to bring in story into it. However, I just don't think at this point of where I'm at, the story is not as fleshed out as I guess you would want it to be, but it's hard to do that when the whole point is to restart your run over and over and over again. Like, it's hard to keep a consistent story going through. There's some very cool, like, atmospheric visual things that they're doing, but it hasn't quite hit there. So I absolutely think they're reliable. Are they one game away? Like, can their next, if their next game hits on the gameplay like Returnal does, and they bring a story, and because we know the fidelity is good, and they bring a story, and they say, here's this amazing story, are they just one game away from being an Elite? My gut says yeah. My gut says actually that they're one game away. So I'm going to put them as a one game away studio. Now, who knows? I know they're bringing more people in, stuff like that, so I don't necessarily need their games to be bigger. Like, I think they found a way to be very creative with the size of the team they had and the game that they had. So it feels Returnal feels a lot bigger than maybe it actually is, and I think that's through the level design and everything. But no, I'm happy with putting them one game away. See, this is the great thing about doing it, on the fly, because you got to think about it, you got to talk about it. All right, let's go Team Asobi. Now, before, when I said that I'm glad that I'm doing this now, as opposed to at the start of the year to talk about the best studios, it's kind of sad I'm doing it now, because Team Asobi is born out of the departure of Japan Studio. When I was getting these images ready and I had Japan Studio there, I'm like, oh, that's sad, because that logo has been in so many games for so long. Not many games that I've played, to be fair, but now it's replaced with Team Asobi. And Team Asobi, to, Team Asobi, I think, has been put into the reliable portion. They, I really like PlayStation VR. Um, I wish I played more of it, but it is a hassle to get it up and running. But I think with Astrobot Rescue Mission and then bringing out Astro's Playroom on the PlayStation 5, they're really solid. Like, I think Astrobot Rescue Mission might be one of the best games on that entire platform. And Astro's Playroom to come out with the PlayStation 5 and the stuff that it does with the controller and the sound out of it and just the level of detail and it sounds really, really like shocking, but the love behind it, like all the little Easter eggs of the different characters showing up, like it was a pretty cool thing to see. And I really started getting into PlayStation probably. Like I had PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, but getting into games was in the PlayStation 3 era. So a lot of that early stuff, it wasn't really something I was into. But to see it there was really cool. And I do think they're reliable. I'm curious as to what their next thing will be. I don't imagine this is ever going to be a studio that is going to be like, okay, we have 400 people and we're making the biggest AAA. I don't think they're ever going to reach that point. But I think whatever they do work on, whether it's a PlayStation VR 2 title or a pack-in for the next, who knows what they're making next. But I think whatever it's going to be is going to be good. I do think they're reliable. So yeah, I'm happy with that placement. All right, let's go. Let's go these guys. Sony San Diego. I'll move that over here so we can see it a little bit better. Sony San Diego. They have been putting out MLB show for a while. I think we've spoken about it a whole bunch on the podcast, but bringing it to Xbox and PC and that has been great for PlayStation on a monetary front. It's great for other people playing on other consoles to see how talented these guys are. I really like playing MLB The Show, especially when you get it on PlayStation Plus for free. And they got to do some interesting games in the early 2010s. So I think they are reliable. I actually think they are a studio that can be one game away. I actually think they're one game away. The problem is that I don't know if they're ever going to be a studio to make that game ever again. And if they just, like, it's been the last Drawn to Death was 2017. If the last 4 years has just been MLB The Show 18, 19, 20, 21. If their next 4 years are just the show, then I'll even the next 2 years. If the next 2 years is just they're reliable, that is the show, then I will move them to reliable. I think if they came out this year or next year and said from Sony San Diego and they said here's an Uncharted game, or they came up with some new property and they were going for the AAA, they have a chance. That's when they would actually probably be elite, because they have all that talent in there, and how they're making one of the best sports games out there with such a limited studio size compared to the big boys. If you're talking about Madden's or FIFA, or soon to be not FIFA anymore, or NBA 2K, imagine what they could do with a new game. So I'm going to put them one game away. If I did this next year, 2 years, they might go down. But I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. And ultimately, this list doesn't really matter anyway. So I'm just going to do that. Let's go down to... Let's get this one out of the road, I would say. Nixxes. Alright, Nixxes. I think by definition needs work, right? Like, I'm sure someone here watching this video, maybe not, maybe no one actually cares about Nixxes. I mean, I'm sure they're reliable at what they do about PC ports, but I don't play a lot of PC ports. But the whole point is that they're working on other people's stuff. I think even a studio like Asobi, where they're creating Astrobot Rescue Mission, right, to work with the VR. Like, they are creating new things. Nixxes is not that. It's about making things that work good over here, work good over here. And I mean, we need these. Like, I think PlayStation need this, especially with all the PC information that's coming out with their first party stuff. So they need a studio like Nixxes, and I don't think you can put them in too soon because they've been around a while. They've done pretty much everything out of Square Enix, whether it's Avengers or Tomb Raider or I think it was a Final Fantasy or something like that. So they've been around long enough, but the whole purpose of the studio is that they need work. They need games to bring over to PC. So I'll just leave you there. People are watching this are like, I thought he was going to have every one of these studios in Elite, and I haven't even got one there yet. But let's have a good conversation about, you know, the one I almost went, but I didn't go that one. Instead, this one, Media Molecule. This is tough. Speaking about creating new things, going from Nixxes to Media Molecule. Media Molecule create games. Literally, they created an engine to create more games, which I think they've actually started creating some. I think there are people that have created games in Dreams that are actually coming onto the PlayStation Store if it's not already there now. So, like, they're very important to PlayStation's makeup. I think one of the leaders of that studio got put into basically the Hall of Fame, where you have people like Konami and stuff like that. So I don't want this studio to shut down, which was I think a very real possibility considering how long Dreams took. And people might have them in one game away, but I just don't see it, because I think they're so creative and like artsy that I don't think they're not going to have that kind of success of a Ghost of Tsushima or Horizon, because they're going to give you something that is not traditional, that is not what you go out to necessarily play video games for. Like, it'll be a different experience and people will love it, and it might stay with you, which is arguable about why we play games, but I just don't think it's ever going to kind of hit that echelon. So I do think they're reliable. I think games like Tearaway is fun, Little Big Planet was fun. They get a lot into the community side of things, which I'm not for. So yeah, that's part of how I play games. But I absolutely think they're reliable. I don't think they're going to come out and make something bad. So I'm gonna leave them there. You just sit right there, nice and pretty. Now, we're getting down to the big suckers. Here we go. Now, I kind of wish that I hadn't kept putting all these in the same spot. Guerilla. Just going to leave it here for now. Guerilla's a very interesting studio. So, what are we talking about? We've talked about, like, what have you done for me lately? The thing they did lately was Horizon and Zero Dawn. And next year, they're going to have another Horizon game, which I think is going to be just awesome to play. Before that, they had the Killzone games. Even the Killzone game that came on PS4, I enjoyed. It was a fun shooter. They tried different things. And then you had the Killzone trilogy before that. So they've been pretty consistent. There was a little 5 year gap, but because Horizon just came out and knocked it out of the park as their first foray into that type of game, really good. Most people would have Guerilla as elite, but I say they're still one game away. I'm trying to remember now. I don't know if I had Horizon Zero Dawn even as an elite game, because while Horizon, like, the gameplay is just awesome. I remember I'm not some first person shooter aficionado, but Killzone felt great to use as a first person shooter. Horizon, I feel, blew that out of the water with how it played. Like, the gameplay itself was fantastic, but there was enough room in that game for improvement where it still had the trappings of, say, a Ubisoft game or something like that, where you go around taking out towers and stuff like that. There are characters that in that game where I remember what they look like. I can't remember any of the names. I was playing a game with my brother the other day, and he put me down as Rost, and I'm like, why'd you put me as Ross? He's like, the guy from Horizon. I'm like, oh yeah, that was his name. That was the mentor. So apart from Aloy, who is an awesome character, like for one game, like as a realized character, like one of the best, I don't, like, she's great, but I just don't think the other characters in the game are that memorable. The story, I remember bits and parts of it, but there's no, like, standout, like, I can't believe I did that during the story. So I think they're one game away, and that literally might be the Horizon sequel, or even the game that, if there's this rumored other game that they're working on as well. It might be the combination of the two, one after the other, that just go, okay, they should be elite. But right now, I think they're one game away. I know Horizon is a lot of people's, like, must play, and I'm not going to argue that part, but I think as a studio, they need to hit this next one out of the park to be elite. So that might surprise people, but that's where I'm putting them. The Guerilla. All right, let's go with another. Let's go with. I need to talk one up now. Insomniac Games. These guys, they hold a pretty special place in my heart, and mainly because the games that I really like about them, from them, I have a real soft spot for Resistance. Mainly the first game. I know a lot of people like the second. I thought it was a bit too hero-y in the second. Like, they made Nathan Hale out like he was going to be some, Marcus Phoenix or Master Chief, like, hero type. Whereas I just kind of liked that this was this, Nathan Hale was his name. Was this ordinary World War II era soldier fighting this war in the first one. So I really liked that. And then Resistance 3, well, I think I appreciated it more later on than when I was actually playing it. But just to tell this story in this world, to finish off that trilogy with the character that you knew in 2, I think that was such a ballsy move. And the weapons in those games were so creative, and you see those weapons starting to pop up in other shooters now, and you're like, man, you guys are like 10 years behind where they were. And not to mention, and that's just Resistance, not to mention they made Sunset Overdrive on Xbox, not to mention of all the Ratchet and Clank games. I haven't played the latest one, obviously, but 2016, like, surprised me with how much I liked it, Ratchet and Clank. And that does not even begin to talk about Spider-Man in 2018 and Miles Morales, which are both awesome games. Like, I just don't think I have as much fun than I do playing those Spider-Man games and just swinging around and doing crimes. There's not that many games that I just want to just continue just playing in it. I think about 4 years ago, I would have these guys as one game away. I'd be like, oh, Ratchet and Clank games, they're good. Resistance, I have a special spot for them in my heart, but they don't appeal to everybody. And then Sunset Overdrive, I also played. I also liked a lot, but it didn't hit with people. Spider-Man has just said, you know what, we are here, and I think they are elite right now. There's all the joke images about Insomniac, like holding up the PlayStation 5, like they're the ones carrying it. And to be honest, because I'm not into the whole console war business, I mean, it is kind of true. Like, I wouldn't have had as much fun with the PlayStation 5 in this first year if Miles Morales wasn't in there. And I'm looking forward to playing the next Ratchet and Clank. And then they're going to be bringing out Spider-Man 2 and Wolverine. Like, they are just on fire. And if you listen to podcasts around there, it sounds like it's not just 3 studios that they might have now. Because we know that Wolverine's been made by the same creative director that made Miles Morales. We know that the team that made Spider-Man is working on Spider-Man 2. We know the Ratchet and Clank team just finished, so they're going to work on something. Maybe another Ratchet and Clank or something else. But there's talk that there might even be a 4th. Like, they have geared up, because we know they talked about hiring multiplayer people for the studio. So there could be 4 teams coming out of that. Like, literally could be getting an Insomniac game every year. So it's crazy. So the output, talk about what you've done for me lately. There's not many studios that have done as much for us lately than Insomniac have. So, I'm glad I can finally put someone in the elite category there. All right, let's go. London studio. I apologize for my poor Photoshop skills. London studio. I don't have much to say for London studio. I think they made a big announcement into the gaming industry, making those SingStar. Like, SingStar would be such a huge thing if they brought that back now. Like, I know Monique, my partner, like, she would bring out SingStar. Like, she would get me to buy it straight away if it was here. But that kind of died away. And I can definitely see it happening. I liked Blood and Truth in VR. I hadn't finished it. But I'm really wishing, I don't think it's going to happen. I really, 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 more than any other game from any PlayStation first party PlayStation studio, I want London Studio to bring back The Getaway, a game I never played, but I love games like Grand Theft Auto. I love Mafia 1, which I finally got to play when it came out last year with the remake. Or was it this year? No, last year. Mafia 2 is one of my favourite games ever. Mafia 3, awesome. We just heard that Hangar 13 and 2K, they've been pulled off this Vault game, which was some superhero type game that they were going to make. It cost them $53 million. I hope they stay around. But, like, how many... Like, I know Grand Theft Auto is a huge game and everybody has it. But, like, why aren't there more games like that? For ages after, like, Skyrim came out, like, it was almost like no one wanted to go near that type of genre because Skyrim did it so well. But then we got Witcher 3, which I didn't love, but you can tell the upgrade in terms of what they were putting into that game. So I would love a getaway game from these guys, British studio, make it a British crime thing to make it different from GTA. But we can have more than one game in the genre, and that would be awesome. However, we're not talking about what we want them to make. We're talking about where we rate them now. I think they need work. Um, I I feel like they kind of hit this peak once PS4 hit. They released the SingStar Ultimate Party, and then it became PlayStation VR Worlds, SingStar Celebration, and Blood and Truth on PlayStation VR, which is much less than when they were like pumping out SingStar games. So I do think they have a history in PlayStation, and that's why I want them to continue to grow. It feels like they've kind of somehow regressed, even though they're probably putting in more effort than. Well, it's hard to say that because we're not in game development, but it feels like there's more creativity going into like something like Blood and Truth than pumping out SingStar sequels every year. So I think they're trying, but I need to see more. I want to see what they learn from Blood and Truth, what they can either, if it's a PlayStation VR 2 game, great, sure. We know what I'm really hoping for, but I do think they need work. They've been around a long time, and yeah, I hope they continue to grow. Let's go to one of the other studios that were purchased this year in Bluepoint Games. Bluepoint Games. So, one of the other studios, I was really happy with the purchase. Really happy with it. It makes sense. They've been working with them for ages. It's funny that everyone talks about, obviously, with Demon Souls that just came out, and you had not the Last Guardian, Shadow of the Colossus. But even I play Uncharted every year for my birthday. It's a ritual. I've been doing it since 2012. So, almost 10 years I've been doing that. So every year I play a different Uncharted game. Which means, because of the amount of games, most of the time I'm playing the remasters of Uncharted 1, 2, and 3. And, they did a delicate balance, especially seen with things like GTA 3, Vice City San Andreas coming out now, and how odd they look. The fact that I can play those Uncharted games, and they come out and they go, oh, this is how I remember them. They've improved things a little bit. They've kept the gunplay and that the same, but I play it and I go, this feels like what they felt like back when I played them then. I haven't gone back and played the old ones, even though I do still have them, but I haven't gone back. And they wouldn't feel as good as that remaster does. And then I think when we talk about these games, I know I'm jumping around a lot. I'm just thinking, like, looking at these studios, it's all about stepping stones. A lot of studios can't just go from like straight to elite. Like, you need some type of resume, but you can't release a game 10 years ago that was elite and then come out and be like, okay, that's an elite studio. This is my argument, and I don't know if I'm ever going to do it with like other studios outside of Sony, but when people were talking about Cyberpunk coming out and Witcher 3, which, one of the greatest RPGs of all time, not arguing against it, not my type of game, but definitely not arguing against it. But when Cyberpunk's coming out and they're talking about CD Projekt Red as like they are one of the elite studios in the industry, I'm like, yeah, but hold on, like, people enjoyed Witcher 1, Witcher 2, and I understand Witcher 3 is an elite game, but that doesn't just make you an elite studio. Like, you need to have either a lot of great games followed up by an elite game. You can't be an elite studio but only release great games. To me, that's not what cuts it. When they were coming up to Cyberpunk, I'm like, they've released an elite game. That's great. That doesn't mean they're an elite studio. Now they're trying something different. They're trying something new. They're doing Cyberpunk. It's a totally different world. Let's see what they do. And they shit the bed. But the whole point is progression. And with Bluepoint Games, they progress. Like, they, this studio to me has really, they were working on ports for ages. They did PlayStation All-Star Battle Royale, they did Flower, Titanfall. They did those ports for 360 and stuff. Then they go, okay, we're going for ports. Now we're going to do a remake, a remaster. So they did Uncharted. They did Gravity Rush. Then they move on to the remakes. They did Shadow of Colossus, Demon Souls. So like, they're progressing, and if the rumors are true, and I think this is actually a really good plan, where if they are making a Demon Souls 2 or a Bloodborne 2, that is the perfect move for them. Because one, it's progression, but two, one, it gives them a way to create something new, like something that hasn't been given to them in terms of this is how they, here's the assets, make them prettier, or here's the AI, like this is how they work, now just slightly adjusted. Now it's like, okay, we can build off something like we've made, but we can create we're not using the assets from another game. Now we're creating our own assets and building out the world. That's like, that would be a perfect way for them to progress, and that's what they need to do. They need to keep progressing. Now, if you watch my PlayStation 4 video, you'll see I had Shadow Colossus as an elite game, and most people be like, well, yeah, it's always been a great game, but I never played it on PlayStation 2. Like, I played it as a PlayStation 4 person, and I'm just like, let's see how this game is. Does it age? Whatever. It was an elite game. It was such a cool experience to play through that. The ending confused me a little bit. Like, I didn't really understand it, but the whole concept of just going through these different, towering structures was just awesome. So, are they an elite studio? No. From all reports, now I'm not a Demon Souls, but Demon Souls is a great game. The Uncharted Collection remaster is great. Shadow Colossus, I would say, is elite. But now now they are with Sony. They need to create. Time to create. You can't just work off the backs of other people, which sounds worse than I'm trying to imply. But it's time to do something that's your own. And you can't be an elite studio until you've done that, in my opinion. So I think they are one game away. Can you imagine they come out with like a Bloodborne 2 and people are just go nuts? But I think they are one game away. They've got an elite game, mind you, remake, but as an elite game under their belt, they hit it like another elite game. Like, there's no doubting, because they're just so solid. I think they're one game away. All right, we're nearing the end here, people. The time is coming. Let's get this out of the way, because I think anyone that is watching this video who watches us on the podcast all the time will know this. I'm going Naughty Dog. I'm not going to I'm just going to put it up here straight away, because that's what it is. Elite. I think they tick all the boxes. They consistently bring out games. So we had, I think the first Uncharted was 2007. Uncharted 2, which was a game, possibly a game of the generation for some, in 2009. Uncharted 3, which is underrated, I think, especially as time has gone on. I think people just hate on it because it's not Uncharted 2. It's not as good as Uncharted 2, but it's still an elite game. That was in 2011. Then they had Last of Us in 2013, Uncharted 4 in 2016, Lost Legacy in 2017, and then Last of Us Part 2 in 2020. So they are consistently releasing games, and they are consistently releasing games that are amazing. I would say Lost Legacy is great. People will be like, it's it hasn't got Nathan Drake, it's the worst Uncharted. But I think it's definitely better than Uncharted 1. And it's probably on par with Uncharted 3 for me. But they they just consistently release good stuff, and they are always, the year they come out, they're the best looking game. Maybe not always in like an art direction sense, like putting that up against like Ghost of Tsushima or something. I get it. Art direction is also something that makes something pretty. But I think people that don't play the games also overlook how realistic their people like. People talk about how Horizon is the best looking game they've done. Now, when they say that, I'm assuming they're taking into consideration like the world and everything like that. But in terms of like the character models and the animation, like, okay, when you play Uncharted 2 now, the animation's not going to look as impressive. But I remember playing Uncharted 3 when he'd like put his hand up against, when he was walking past the wall and he put his hand up to touch the wall. I'm like, no one was doing that. In the first Uncharted, where the pants would get wet and then dry. Like, no one was doing that. And to top it all off, I was playing Last of Us Part 2 the other week with a friend. And, like, just the way you move in that game. It's so good. Like, it's the best stealth game I've ever played. After playing, Metal Gear Solid 5 was probably at the top for me then. And that's a whole nother story, but like Last of Us Part 2, just, you can do everything in that game. Everything is fluid. You don't feel like you've gone from, okay, now I'm in hiding state, and now I'm in the clear, and now I'm in the action scene. Like, you can get in and out of situations through so many different means, and it's the right amount of tension. They're elite. They've been around a long time. Like, there's legacy, there's not much more I can say. I talk about them most weeks on the podcast, so you don't need to hear me talk about it now. But if they've really expanded to like 3 different teams, like, I can't wait to see what they do next. I hope they do something new and different, because I think that's a thing that made Uncharted 4, which I think might be my favorite Uncharted. The thing that made that good is that they went and made Last of Us, which is one of my favorite games of all time. And then Part 2, now I can't separate the two. It is literally, and it's not just because of naming conventions, but Last of Us Part 1 and Part 2 is like Godfather Part 1 and Part 2 for me. Like, I can't separate them. Both, you can watch them individually if you had to, but they both just bring so much to each other. Just elite. It's done. Didn't want to save that for last, because that would have been a boring last one. But I do only have 2 left. So now we're going to go Sony Santa Monica. In 2018, when God of War came out, it was absolutely... that was the game I wanted to win. Game of the Year and all that. As time has gone on, I think I actually love Red Dead more, but I still probably would have wanted it to win in 2018. Like, they're so neck and neck, those 2 games that came out. But as a studio, they make... Oh, this is tough. Listen, they make elite games. The ability to have the God of War series, and I've played God of War 3, and to finish off that trilogy, I know Ascension was after it, but to finish off that trilogy of God of War 3, that was the best version of a hack and slash genre action game that you could make, like cinematically and everything, insane. And then to take that, and 8 years later, do a soft reboot and be like, this is still God of War, but we're changing it. And then to make another game that is probably one of the best in its genre again, like, it's seriously, there's not many studios that can do that. And you can't give them any more credit than they get, and it's well deserved. But I'm going to surprise some people here, because I'm putting them as 1 game away. I know they've made 2 elite games, and that should automatically make them elite. But you know what my thing is, and you know what I've been talking about during this with some of these, when I talk about Insomniac and Naughty Dog. Naughty Dog has made elite games as well. They made Uncharted, they made Last of Us, and like pick which game in that series, whatever. Insomniac have made probably, well, I guess 2 elite games in the Spider-Man games, and then Ratchet and Clank. I haven't played enough of them, but everything they make is great. But you know what? They made Resistance and Ratchet and Sunset Overdrive, like all these different things. My thing with Sony Santa Monica at this point is that they basically made one franchise. And that's great if you can keep making elite games in one franchise. And even though they changed the gameplay and changed everything in God of War reboot, but I think something has to be said, like, listen, there's a safety, I guess, going back to Kratos and being able to work with everything you know from that character from before. Like, we're changing him, but we're going to kind of work off what you already know and give you something different, which, once again, is awesome. But, like if you thought of Bungie, I'd say is an elite studio. And you know why? Because they made the best Halo games, like elite Halo games, and you can argue which ones are the elite ones, but for me, Halo 2 is elite. And then they make Bungie one of the best. It's essentially it's a MOBA now. It's a MOBA RPG, just a lot of letters. Like they're elite, but that's because while they're still sci-fi fantasy, they were able to create something new and do different stuff with it. Like it plays different to Halo, and they don't have as much room to move because of like the first person shooting than God of War does necessarily. Like doing the close up camera and one, like they do a lot of different stuff. Sony Santa Monica Studio. But I'd love to see them make another. It just needs to be a great game. Like if they just make a great game in another and create a new property, that would probably get them elite. Like they're literally one step away. Like I can't, I'm probably being a little bit harsh, but the only other game they've made that's not God of War is Kinetica in 2001. And I'm sorry, as we talked about at the very start of this, I'm not including a game that was made 20 years ago. Like, I'm sorry, how many of those people would still be there? Barely a handful, I would say. So listen, they're one game away. I know some people are going to be angry with that, but I think you need to take into consideration, like, you can't just stay on the one franchise the whole time. You got to do different stuff. So, with that surprise, we have the last one, which is I'm not good at Photoshop. Sucker Punch. I like doing this on the fly because now I'm just rethinking what I've said, and I'm like, am I contradicting myself? Am I being hypocritical? I don't think I have been, but you can comment. Sucker Punch. Let's go through the resume, shall we? Let's bring her up. Sucker Punch Productions. Obviously, we got Ghost of Tsushima and Legends of that. Before that, Infamous, and then Sly. So they've got a history. I think Infamous, great game. Great series. I think you can have your comments about Second Son, but I think they all pretty much land in the great zone. When I did the PlayStation 4 games, I had Infamous in there. The gameplay with them is so good, and that's why the Infamous games always felt so good, was because of their gameplay. Story-wise, not so much. Ghost of Tsushima. This whole generation, their gameplay in Ghost of Tsushima is the best. Takes a little bit to get used to, but when you get that, as I refer to it as the dance, when you start dancing with the different the different stances and stuff, and you get into that mode, like it's awesome. It's not too fast, it's not too challenging, but it's just the balance is insane. But I think you'll remember when I listed Ghost of Tsushima, I had them just below elite, just below elite, simply because like the story in Ghost of Tsushima, um, it was about revenge. It was a revenge tale, which very much plays into those Japanese, old Japanese films, which I get, and I think that was the right way to go. But it was weird coming off Last of Us Part Two, which had such a uh, deeper conversation about revenge, and then Ghost of Tsushima was like, "No, revenge is good. Let's go. Let's just go. No, just kill all the Mongolians. It works," which works for the game. So I'm not putting it against it. It was just weird to come from one game to another, both about revenge and told totally different ways. But I wouldn't say they've made an elite game. Like, can you be an elite? Can you be an elite studio if you've never made an elite game? Some people might say Ghost of Tsushima is elite, but just I think they're in a very similar situation to Guerrilla with Horizon. They haven't made they haven't made the elite game yet. I don't think. Oh, let me have a drink. Let me think about this. No, I don't think they're there yet. I think they're very similar to where Gorilla is. As I was saying, they're on the right track. Like talking about what we just went through with Sony Santa Monica, how they've made one franchise, they've made elite games, but just with one franchise. Gorilla and Sucker Punch are the opposite. They've made different games, great games, but to me, they've yet to just hit the elite. I'm trying to think of the other elite like studios in the industry, and like apart from Naughty Dog and Insomniac, which I put there, but Rockstar is one of them. And would I put Sucker Punch up against someone like Rockstar? You think no, that's silly, but that's kind of where I'm going with this. Like this is who you are competing with, and Bungie. I don't play their games, but I think they're an elite studio. There's probably heaps that I'm forgetting, but I think when you really think about it and you say, is Sucker Punch up there against those guys? I don't think they are. I don't think they're there quite yet. And also, as much as people might get mad at how I've gone through these and talking about these, the exciting part of it, as someone that loves so many of these studios, the exciting part of it is what happens. Like, what's the next game? Like, so many of like you can see, so many of these studios are one game away. And what happens when they make that game? Like, what is that game going to be? Can we suddenly go from having two elite studios after a very dominant generation of studios just knocking games out of the park? What happens when Sony Santa Monica bring out some other game that they're working on, which I'm pretty sure is Cory Barlog's game, or when Guerrilla announce whatever their second studio's working on? Like, what happens when these guys go, you know what? Here's something. And then they bring out the stuff that we still love, like a sequel to Ghost of Tsushima and Horizon. Horizon might put Guerrilla up there, but Black Ghost of Tsushima might come out and be like, holy shit, I can't believe they upped their game. And suddenly we have more elite studios. That's kind of what I'm hoping for. It wouldn't be as exciting if everyone was just elite. And I think it needs to be a special club for you to be an elite studio. There are a lot of studios around the world, but to get that the consistency and just, I don't know where I was going with that last part. But yeah, a lot of it is consistency. A lot of it is what you've done for me lately. It's great if they have a legacy as well, but that brings something, a little bit of something, but maybe like 10%. Like, it doesn't sway the result. But I'm just going to double check here, but that is all the studios. That's my final ranking. So, let's go through them. So, down the bottom, for Too Soon, we had San Mateo and Malaysia studios supported around so soon that there's too much. You can't really say much about them yet. Firesprite, huge team. Sony clearly are wanting to get something out of what they're doing at the moment, when they're willing to bring in 250 people just to get it. So I'm excited what they are working on, but it's too soon. Resume, too short for me. Next, needs work. Played around with this a little bit. You have ones like XDEV and Nixxes where literally they need work to continue on. They may be reliable in what they do, but they need work to just exist. So that's where we'll stick them. Bend Studio, Pixelopus, London Studio. Room to improve from them all. All have promising upside, but needs work. Next, reliable. We've got Polyphony Digital, Team Asobi, Media Molecule. Games, studios where they're very good in their little domains, but we don't see them move out of it a lot. And they need to show us something else for them to be considered elite. This is meant to be a wrap up, but Polyphony Digital, you can be elite at making car games, but I don't think that makes you an elite studio. It makes you maybe elite at what you're doing. But I'd say you're reliable at making great car games. I wouldn't say you're an elite studio. So, yeah, those three, I think, all reliable. One game away. These are the studios where they need the elite game to bring them up. They're close. Everyone respects them. And if they just bring out that one new game, they're there. That just totally knocks it out of the park. Housemarque, Sony San Diego, Guerilla, Bluepoint Games, Sony Santa Monica, Sucker Punch. Agreed with myself. Agreed. And lastly, Elite. Insomniac Games holding up PlayStation at the moment with the new generation, and Naughty Dog. Every game they put out is no fail. Multiple Elite games. Two of my favorite franchises of all time, and it's not just because they're Naughty Dog; it's how they make their games. Yeah. So we've gone on for a little bit now, but I think I've wrapped it up. I'm done. I'm really happy I did this. I really want to do this with the guys, especially with Chant with the Xbox studios. I kind of want to interview him about it. So hopefully I can convince him to do that. I think he loves doing this ranking just as much as I do. But I'm gonna try. I'm trying. If you're listening, I'm throwing it down. Cap to cap, throwing it down. Superman would do it. Not as good as Superman. Anyway, thank you for watching to the end of the video. If you have, I really appreciate it. We have been going through a lot with the guys trying to get the podcast up. Three different time zones, even though two of us are in Australia. And Chant's been going through some weird work times. So we're hoping to get in front of the camera a little bit more coming up soon. But I'm glad if you're still here to watch to the end. I had a lot of fun doing this. So even if there's two of you that are out there that watched it and enjoyed it, thank you for watching. Comment below. I'll absolutely respond. And if you want to tweet at me, that's good too. I'm easy to find. Yeah. So thank you very much, and I will see you on the podcast. Thank you.